Revelation 12 and verse 7 and following, and like I said, we'll read through about verse 12, and then we'll make some observations and talk about some things, and then move on. There was a war in heaven, Michael and his angels waging war with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels waged war, and they were not strong enough. There was no longer a place found for them in heaven. The great dragon was thrown down, the serpent of old, who is called the devil and Satan. And so there's where we are directly told who this great dragon is. There's no doubt about it. Who deceives the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, "Now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come." Now that's an important revelation in understanding what's being talked about here. As this progresses and we see the downcast of the great dragon, what happens? The salvation and the power and the kingdom and the authority of his Christ have come. That's when these events take place. For the accuser of our brethren has been thrown down, who accuses them before our God day and night, and they overcame him because of the blood of the Lamb and because of the word of their testimony, and they did not love their life even to death. For this reason, rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, knowing that he has only a short time. All right, as I mentioned in the introduction, very often this is one of those places that people go to and say, okay, this is the war in heaven that produced the devil. As I mentioned in the introduction, that can't possibly be true because the devil is already active. He's active in the verses before this. He's active earlier in the book. We have to understand this is not talking about something that happened a long time ago. An insurrection that arose in heaven a long time ago. It's not history, because this is part of the revelation of the things that John said must shortly come to pass. These are the things that John is actually being shown that the saints are going to experience the effects of. I mentioned again in the introduction that the point of shifting the war focus to heaven seems to be more a imagery shift so that we understand that what's going on is spiritual, that it's not material. Verse 11. Look at verse 11 with me. I mentioned that verse 10 is key, and it is, and we'll talk about that a little bit in just a moment. But verse 11, they overcame him because of the blood of the Lamb and because of the word of their testimony. This war, where Satan is cast down, couldn't have happened until what? Until the crucifixion. Until the blood was there to be offered. That's what gave the victory. That's why he was defeated. That's why he was cast down, because of the blood of the Lamb. So Jesus would have had to have ascended into heaven and offered his blood to the Father before these events could have been. It seems simply to be about the defeat of Satan. The limiting of Satan is a better way, because when you get to the end of the story, what does it say? This isn't the end of the story, but the end of this section. It says, knowing that he only has a short time. He's been cast to the earth, he's been limited, and he only has a short time. There is this limitation that is placed on what he's able to do at this point. Now, I think it would be good here to start thinking about various things that we've already been told. For instance, Matthew. Let's go back to Matthew chapter 12. Matthew chapter 12. I think I want to start in verse 27. Yeah. So this is, Jesus is healing a man possessed of a demon. And he's accused of doing it by the power of the prince of demons, Beelzebub. He says, if I cast out demons by Beelzebub, by whom do your sons cast them out? Therefore, they will be your judges. And I think all he's saying there is just their behavior and their practice testifies against the claim that they're making. But if the Spirit of God, if it's by the Spirit of God that I cast out demons, then the kingdom of God has come upon you. You'll recall that what we just read says in verse 10 that this is when the kingdom of God has appeared. This is when the authority has come down. If I do this by the power of God, then the kingdom of God has come upon you. How can someone enter a strong man's house and plunder his goods unless he first binds the strong man? Then he can indeed plunder his house. In other words, Christ is teaching that until Satan is limited, Christ can't do his work. So it's necessary that he did the things that he did. It's necessary that Satan be bound or limited in order for the kingdom to come. And I think that is what is being portrayed here, is the struggle between God and Satan, which really isn't a struggle between God and Satan. It's really a struggle between Satan and who? Men who would follow God. And by the way, how old is that struggle? Since Eve. That's when it started. When Satan tried to entice Adam and Eve away from God. And it's continued. And we're given a very bold and beautiful picture of it. Beautiful in the sense of being clear, not in the sense of actually being something nice to look at. In the book of Job, where you've got this righteous man who continually does what is good and is pleasing to God, and that God is in relationship with and is, if you'll allow me to use this term in a human way, proud of. Have you considered my servant Job? And Satan is allowed to do what to Job? Put him through the... What was taken from Job? Just let's think about that for a moment. Okay, everything, not everything if you account for the spiritual, but everything if you account for the physical. Everything's taken from him. His reputation, his health, his well-being, his wealth, his possessions, his flocks, his children. Every relationship of Job is touched. The only limit on Satan was what? You can't kill him. That was it. Now, here's the next thing I want you to think about. How much information did Job have about what was happening and what was going on? None. Absolutely none. He had no idea where this was coming from, what it was about, how he should respond to it. He's struggling every step of the way through the whole book trying to say, look, God, I have always trusted in you and always did what I knew was right and believed to be right, always listened and helped the people who couldn't help themselves. I've always done everything that I could. What in the world is happening? He had no idea. What about us? Turn with me to 2 Corinthians chapter 2 and verse 11. Hopefully I have the right citation and this is going to work out well. Yep, good. Let's back up to verse 10. Anyone whom you forgive, I also forgive. Indeed, what I have forgiven, I have forgiven. If I've forgiven anything, has been for your sake in the presence of Christ, so that we would not be outwitted by Satan, for we are not ignorant of his designs or his devices. We've been made aware of Satan. We've been made aware of what Satan is. In this very context, by the way, we're told that he is what? That he's the accuser of our brethren. We're told that he deceives the whole world. We know what he's trying to do. We know who's trying to draw us away from God. We know the avenues that are being used. We're introduced to them in Genesis chapter 3, right? The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life. We're not ignorant of his devices, of his work, of his presence. We're told by Peter that he's roaming on the earth as a roaring lion, seeking those whom he may devour. We are made fully aware that he is our adversary. Job didn't know any of that. So part of what we need to understand about how this binding took place, how this limiting of Satan took place, had to do with the teaching that came through Christ. The revelation which was completed by and through Christ. He came teaching us. And he did say, I have other things to say which you can't bear now, but when I go, I'll send the Spirit back and he'll reveal to you all things. And he's going to take of mine and declare them to you. And so it all gets traced back to Jesus. But that work of revealing the wiles of Satan and what he is, that's what limits Satan. That's what gives us the power to overcome. You remember what James said? James chapter 4 and verse 7. Resist the devil and he'll flee from you. How do I resist the devil? Oh, Jesus showed me how, didn't he? Matthew chapter 4. How did he do it? It's written. So we have at our disposal now tools that Job didn't have. Information, an example, an awareness of the threat. Is it easier to defend yourself from a threat that you're aware of compared to a threat that you are not? If you walk up toward me from the front, aggressively with a weapon in your hand, I am much better positioned to defend myself than that fellow that was walking down the sidewalk in New York City a few weeks ago, and a guy ran up behind him and hit him in the back of the head with a bat. Had no idea he was there, had no idea he was coming, had no idea he had any designs on him, just whacked him in the back of the head with a bat. He was completely helpless and completely ignorant, and so he didn't even raise his hand to block the bat. We don't get attacked blindly like that. And I would suggest to you that that's in large part how Satan's been limited. We should not undervalue the importance of God making his revelation known. And it goes beyond just the value of the information about God. It also explains a lot more about our experience in this life. It prepares us to face the tests of life. We are not ignorant of Satan's devices. So we can put on the armor of God and defend ourselves. What armor did Job have? Apparently very little. He was just sitting there one day minding his own business, doing everything as he had always done, living righteously and godly, and one right after the other people came to him and said, you've lost this, you've lost this, you've lost this has happened. And his wife said, curse God and die. And he said, I don't know what's going on. You know what I would say? Satan's working hard. Why can I say that? Because I have the book of Job. Because I have the story of Eden. Because I have the teaching of Jesus. Because I have the book of Revelation. He has not been stopped from working. But he's lost his strongest tool, which was ignorance, the ignorance of man. The ill preparation that man had. Do you notice, you go back to read the story in the Garden of Eden, God's instruction, I'm not going to suggest that we have all God's instructions to them. So I don't know what, but there's nothing revealed to us that suggests that God ever told Adam and Eve, by the way, there may be an adversary that comes along and tries to tell you something different than what I've told you, so don't listen to him. Never told that. They're just simply told what? Don't eat that. It'll kill you. You know what we're told? Don't eat that, it'll kill you. And by the way, there's someone trying to deceive you. And he's going to tell you that it's okay to eat it. Don't do it. We have that information. That is a huge limitation on the effectiveness of Satan. And what Jesus seems to be teaching in Matthew 12, and what seems to be being taught here, is that in order for the kingdom to come into the world, that had to happen. That information had to be provided, that sacrifice had to be made. When those two things were done, then the kingdom could exist on the earth. We could learn and grow and share a relationship with God and defend ourselves in the war. Now you want to talk about the value of the church? Here's the value of the church. That's where we have protection. That's where we have the defenses. That's where we can do battle with the devil. In the world, we're one of those that he can seek and devour. In the protection of the sheepfold of God, we have some protection. So all of this language is important and is extremely valuable in understanding what's going on, what we're a part of, what we share in. Right now, there is a movement among people. And there's a television commercial that's running right now. I don't know what network it's running on because I don't pay attention to that kind of stuff. I've just heard it in passing when the television was playing. The guy says, I'm not talking to you about religion. I'm talking to you. This is a preacher for some denomination of some sort. I have no idea who he's from. One of these days, if I catch it early enough, I'm going to actually listen to the whole thing so I can make a record of who it is and what he's saying. But it caught my ear last week. I'm not talking to you about religion. Is religion terrible? And yet we live at a time where organized religion is being run down by everyone. Now, I'm not going to tell you that there aren't bad things happening in the name of religion. But there is also true and pure religion that comes from God. That's important. Being a part of that is essential. There's a lot of churches, but then there's also the church that Christ built. That's important. Being a part of that is essential. That is part of what we're learning here. This great lady is in battle. It is together that we can defeat our enemy. We try to fight him by ourselves, we're in trouble. We need to fight him with God. By the way, who's the head of the church? Christ. He told his disciples, I will never leave you nor forsake you. So fear not. I'm with you always. It's here that we're doing battle with God. We need to understand the value and the importance of our fellowship. You ain't going to do it alone. You're not going to be successful, at least. Because we are in a war. That's what's being described here. We are in a war. And it is not a fleshly war. It's not a war for our bodies. Satan could care less where your body is. He's perfectly happy with you sitting in this pew in this building today. That doesn't bother him in the least. You know what he's worried about? The inner man. Where's your heart? Where's your devotion? Where's your faith? As long as he's able to draw you away from God and deceive you and to pull away your trust and your confidence in God, your trust and your confidence in His ways, He's happy. He's winning. When the dragon saw that he was thrown down to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. Is Satan persecuting the church? Yeah. By the way, we're told and warned about that too. And the 2 wings of the great eagle were given to the woman. Now, I want to stop right there and talk about that for a minute. Is that new imagery? What does it mean to be given the wings of eagles? See, if that was the first time we ever read anything about that, then we would be sitting here going, what in the world does that mean? I don't see any wings. Go back to Exodus 19, verse 4. On third new moon, actually verse 1, on the third new moon after the people of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on that day they came to the wilderness of Sinai. They set out from Rephidim and came to the wilderness of Sinai, and they camped in the wilderness, and Israel camped before the mountain while Moses went up to God. So we're reading about that exchange where Moses, the chosen one of God, goes on to the Mount Sinai and receives from God His law. That's what we're talking about here. So look at verse 4. You yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians. What is he talking about there? Okay, we got the plagues, but we got something even more significant than the plagues at this point. After the plagues, he let them go, but then what did they do? They changed their mind and they pursued them. They pursued them as far as the Red Sea. The Red Sea's been parted. Israel's crossing on dry land, and Egypt decides what? We're going to go after them. And what happens? God destroys them all at the sea. You saw what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. You see, the Egyptians were judged and destroyed. But the Israelites, they were brought safely through and carried all the way to the mountain of God and were now face to face with God. I brought you to myself. How did he do it? On eagle's wings. Look at Isaiah 40. Isaiah 40 and verse 31. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not be faint. What are we talking about here?
Relying on God's strength.
God providing strength and protection and care and deliverance. If we'll wait on the Lord, He will bear us up on eagle's wings. Now we are introduced once again to that same imagery. He says, I gave the woman 2 wings of the great eagle. What is that telling us? God is providing. God is watching. God is delivering. God is strengthening. He hasn't left us in the battle alone. Where are we going to get that strength, by the way? Where are we going to get those wings? From God, but practically, where does it come from? Okay, His Word. The knowledge that He's revealed to us. Where are we going to get to the point that we actually possess enough of that knowledge and enough understanding of that knowledge that it's helpful? I've been carrying one of these things around literally since I was 3 years old. Is that what gave me the protection? That I had a book in my hand? I can't remember the name of the movie. I don't even remember if it's worth watching. But I do remember, grab that phone please very quickly. I do remember this, that there is this scene where this supposed preacher is going out to protect his church, which is really the building where they meet, but that's a whole other discussion for another day. And he walks out with his Bible and he lays it on the ground in front of a bulldozer that's about to and that bulldozer can't cross the Bible. That is not the strength of this book. I have to eat it. That's from earlier in this very book that we're studying right now, right? I have to eat the words of the scroll. I have to put them into my heart. I have to consume them. I have to put them into practice. I have to learn them and understand them and gain the wisdom from them so that I can live the righteous life that they are instructing me in. How's that going to happen? Can I do that all by myself? You got all those passages that talk about as iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another. You got all those passages about bear one another's burdens. You got all those one another passages that Jesus taught. You got the fact that he said, don't neglect the practice of coming together to stimulate one another to love and good deeds. Am I going to get the protection that is provided by the eagle's wings outside of being a part of the lady who was given them? No. Not being with the lady was given wings. That's where I get strength. That's where I get deliverance. We can't discount what God has done. I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. There's a huge movement right now to talk about just have a personal relationship with God. You need to have a personal relationship with God, don't get me wrong. But just having a personal relationship with God is not following what God revealed in the Scriptures. I will build my church, and death doesn't have any power over it, is what's taught in the Scriptures. The dragon's down here, and the dragon is warring with us and persecuting us and trying to destroy us. But God gave 2 wings of the great eagle given to the woman in order that she might fly into the wilderness to her place where she was nourished for a time and times and a half from the presence of the serpent. He gives us deliverance from Satan through his church. That's why he built it. That's what it was made for. He didn't build the church because he thought it would be neat. And I promise you this, he didn't build the church so we could have business meetings. He built the church so we could find some deliverance from our adversary. So we could be nourished. So that we can find our place apart from Satan. That's the second bell. Is it just me, or were they rang almost simultaneously? In little space? Okay. All right, we got to stop then. If the good Lord wills, we will pick up and finish out this section next time. This gets real dense, and there's a lot of points that have to be brought out. So it is going to slow down a little bit here. But I'm still not planning to do a true verse by verse. I want us to be looking at big pictures. So, go back and read maybe chapters 10, 11, 12, and 13 as a block in preparation for us talking about it next time.